This week's episode of This Is Only a Test is brought to you by Huawei's MateBook X Pro, winner of 27 global awards that now comes with Windows Hello. Unlock your Huawei MateBook X Pro with the touch of your fingerprint, secure, fast, and no password to remember. For a limited time, get a free $300 gift card with purchase. Visit a Microsoft store near you today.
Hey, let's start the show.
For Friday, July 6th, 2018, welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. This is only a test. I'm Norm, and as you can tell from the low quality of our musical intro, Jeremy, who typically is our sound engineer and runs our audio cues, is off on break this week. I'm running music through my laptop, which has a very broken headphone jack. But deal with it. You can deal with it. And we also deal with our other co-host this week. We have Kishore Hari.
Hello.
Sitting in the middle seat.
I don't understand what I'm supposed to do.
I know.
Here.
You got to look both directions now. Not only to the right.
I'm feeling like this well of the need to be like, guys, be more positive.
And then we have the number one fan of this podcast, listener of all 456 episodes. It's Danica Johnson. Chan.
There's nothing true about that.
Yeah. How many episodes?
Except your name?
Wait.
But no, the name is right.
How many episodes have you actually listened to?
I typically,
if it's greater than 2, I'll be very disappointed.
The thing is, I like not knowing every beat of Norm's professional life. I enjoy that.
I mean, all healthy marriages are founded on not knowing too much about your spouse.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Sure.
Why not?
You're saying that your wife doesn't listen to this podcast.
Oh, no chance. She doesn't listen to any of my podcasts.
Wow.
The other day, she was...
not an inquiring mind.
Yeah, she was asking me about research about screen time. I'm like, I just did a show about that last week. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Wow. Well, I think Jeremy's wife actually listens to the podcast.
Hi, Abra.
Hi.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and that's why we got to watch what we say. Jeremy's a great guy.
He's very positive.
And he's spending time with family. What a great thing to do this week. Spend time with family. We're recording this a little late this week, not because Danica and I just got back from a long trip, and we also it's a weird week. We had July 4th this week on a Wednesday, but Kishore, you're the one responsible for late podcast this week.
I am.
Because you have some developments at home. What's going on?
Yes, we added a family member. We adopted a little kitten on Tuesday. And so it's like 2 months old, like 2 months and a couple days. So it is adorable and pretty much is like the kind of podcast listener that we all crave. Is that she's anti all cords. She's like cord cutter extreme. And by that, I mean she's trying to eat all of the cords in our house.
Oh, that's good, right? That's a positive thing.
How are your arms? Are you getting scratched? Is she intense?
I'm not. I put the child in between me and the kitten at all times.
Those
and
needly little kitten teeth are...
So
yeah.
where'd you get the cat from? And
the SF SPCA. It's a gray-orange tabby mix. She looks like, those spectacular nights in the sunset when the sun sets and we see that sort of like orange, gray mix. She reminds me of that.
Oh.
Are we telling names or are we hiding children's names?
So we're still having arguments in the house, but
Are they finalists?
My son wants to call her Sky, so I think that's going to win out.
With a E? Without an E. That's a pretty important distinction, especially for fans of like Marvel.
My wife wants the E on it because she is hipster extraordinaire.
Yeah. Go with the most unorthodox spelling. That's how you make sure your kid's name is cool. Isn't that right? Is that right?
I mean, we'll call it situational at best.
Yeah. I expect many E's at the end of your child's name now.
So many E's.
No. Thank you all out there, also listeners who listened last week and enjoyed the baby tech recommendations. Hey, Danica, they gave us recommendations for baby technology.
You think I should listen to that?
That's
podcast?
that's something that happened.
No, we
last
mostly
week on
were
the
like,
podcast.
don't buy that. Don't buy that.
Okay.
You don't need that. Then Norm was like, maybe I don't want to know that.
Because maybe I do want that.
Oh,
Yeah.
well.
The recommendations were great, and it sounds like some of you enjoyed it, so we'll be revisiting the topic as we get closer to the coming.
Go time.
Yeah, go time. And also get Will in here as well, because it is maybe after the birth. And so when I am actually a father, it can be a bunch of dads.
So I want to get this straight. We're calling it The Coming, and Will is going to be part of your afterbirth?
Yes.
Those are
exactly-
mistakes all around.
I know. Yeah. It was the humidity. That's the problem. I also want to thank people out there for their fantastic recommendations for things to do in New York, including Kishore. You had some great recommendations.
Excellent help.
I think I only recommended like a couple things. So I think I first recommended, and you could hear this on Still Untitled, where I got the recommendation was going to see In and of Itself, which both of you participated in.
I think that's the thing with this episode. Not only is it great for Danica to be here and talk about our experiences in New York, but with this roster, everyone in this room has now seen the show In and of Itself, the one-man show, magic show in New York, off-Broadway, that Adam highly recommended. He'd seen it multiple times. If you listen to Still Untitled, he's raved about it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to not spoil the show now, but we will at the end of this podcast. So some people, we were debating about this earlier before we started, some people on Twitter may never make it out there to New York, and they want us to talk about the show. And maybe the appropriate time to talk about this show is after it closes, because it's supposed to close in August, I believe. And you're right. That would be a great time to talk about this show when you can no longer see it. But I also believe it's fresh in our memory, and I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fine. It's not you can spoil aspects of the show, but really a lot of the show is built on your own personal, interaction with it.
Yeah.
And as much as we can spoil, Derek DelGaudio has said, at least in the New Yorker, there's a big New Yorker profile on him and the show. They allowed New Yorker to talk about the parts of the show. So he's at least said to them,
and it was photographed.
And photographed. So he said to them that that doesn't ruin the experience, and we can corroborate that. Knowing the beats of the show doesn't necessarily ruin the experience, but we're going to save that for the end. So we'll treat this like we do a standard This Is Only a Test spoiler talk, which will change the LEDs in the back, the light. We'll attempt to. So if you're watching the video, and I will play some sort of audio cue. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
Yeah.
The lights will change.
Yeah.
The lights will probably turn off and start flashing, and then we'll argue with each other about how to operate the lights, and then we'll start talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that'll be like the last 20 minutes of the show, of this episode.
But before we obviously get there, what else did you guys do in New York?
Oh, so we were deciding, and this is for our, the air quotes, baby moon. It's, I guess, this new thing that people do that go on vacation.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Before you can't really travel anymore.
Until your waddle is just too much to actually put on a plane.
We were thinking about two options. We were thinking either a drive to Oregon, Central Oregon.
The highway is literally closed between Oregon and California now because of fires. So I think you made the right choice.
No,
and that would have been the weekend. Whoa.
Yeah, well, we talked about that. That came up. That was already a thing because I'm a huge fan of the Columbia River Gorge. I've been there half a dozen times, and I love going to the Timberline Lodge. And I really want to show that to Norm. And there's all these wonderful things about it. But because of the fire situation, a lot of those waterfalls on this waterfall trail you can't even get to. So it's not the time to do that trip.
It was going to be a big Tesla testing trip also.
Yeah.
But we decided to fly to New York because we haven't really been there together. And our thing is food and musicals, food and shows. And so we did the food thing, we did the show thing, we did the museum thing. It's going to be boring for you, but maybe you'll make it to New York someday. And these are the recommendations we have. One, Natural History Museum. Fantastic. Free. Well, kind of.
Suggested donation.
Suggested donation. The people there If you ask them, what do people usually donate? They will not tell you.
Of
They'll
course
ask
not.
you, what is it worth your time? What do you think it's worth? And
How
they'll
important
guilt
do you think museums are
Yeah.
to the cultural vibrancy of our society?
Yeah. And so they're
Well, and for the way we think about it, because of how we do museums, we're like, we're going to be here an hour to 90 minutes tops.
Yeah.
So,
because we have other things that we have on our
also,
schedule.
we're
Wait.
very efficient.
What is the exhibit there? What was it?
There was no special exhibit that we
Oh.
went into. We just did the standard,
Oh,
Saw
dinosaurs.
Yes. I'm sorry. There was a new dinosaur exhibit that made it worthwhile. It was truly a Jurassic Park moment. Relatively new. I want to say 2015, 2016. But Natural History Museum in New York, of course, has a Hayden Planetarium. They have, if you go to San Francisco, they have very similar, they share planetarium shows. This one is about dark matter.
Dark Universe.
Dark Universe, near Neil deGrasse Tyson.
What do they do? Put you in an empty room and be like, "Here you go.
Yeah.
It's dark. we
Visuals-
don't know.
visuals
Doesn't
instruments.
interact."
They have, of course, the famous Catcher in a Rye, the exhibits with the stuffed creatures, right? Taxidermy creatures, the scenes, they're nice. And then there's also a dinosaur section. Now, this is not our favorite dinosaur museum that we've been to.
No.
Our favorite dinosaur, if you're going to go to one dinosaur museum
It's better be in Canada.
in let's say in North America, it's the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Canada.
Yes.
1,000%.
Amazing.
That one, not only in the sheer number of of skeletons on display, but the size and the presentation.
And the presentation is spectacular.
There's one room, there are multiple rooms with just giant T-Rexes lit like dramatically in the room, as well as there's a side of a wall that's just like the fossil of a full skeleton in the wall.
And it's not a small wall.
No.
It is giant.
It is an art museum dedicated to dinosaurs. And
Absolutely.
it's along the Burgess Shale, so you can actually go take hikes out from the museum
Which we
into the
did.
shale
Yes.
and actually discover some fossils.
Yeah, that's in Canada. In New York, you got the Natural History Museum, but the one exhibit that I hadn't seen, the last time I was there was, I think, with Tested at 2013 when we went to see the Intrepid and New York Maker Faire. And this room, so Natural History Museum is indoors, right? It's a series of, the rooms are big, but there's one room they have a, God, what is it? It's Brontosaurus? It's a long neck, long tail dinosaur. A replica, of course, of the full skeleton in a room that's too small for it. And so the head sticks out of one room and the tail basically goes around the back and sticks out the other door. And when you walk in, you see this head and then you see how long the neck is and then how big the body is. And it felt like a Jurassic Park moment where it was like, this is a massive, massive creature. It was a massive, massive creature. And really putting this into perspective, how big dinosaurs are.
Especially because when you approach the room from the front, its cute little head is sticking outside of the cased opening. So it's like inviting you in, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And then you walk in, and this room is just perfect. Perfect proportionally to make you feel the enormity of this creature.
And then they play the Jurassic Park theme song.
I was just humming it the whole time.
Yeah.
It was secret AMNH awesome thing is they have a big blue whale, and once a year they clean it.
Oh.
And that's the day to go to
That's-
watch them clean
Wow.
the dust off of it.
I will also say that room with the big blue whale, which you've seen at 30 Rock, they've done, Jack Nottingham's done monologues in there, is the coldest room in the Natural History Museum on a hot day. And we were there in many hot days, in like 95 to 100 degree humid New York days.
Yeah.
That was a chilling room. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it was great.
There's a
Titanosaur.
That was the
And
name of
here's the
Oh.
sweet little face.
That is Titanic.
Sweet little face.
Other things, other museums went over to Astoria in Queens area, and went to, of course, the Museum of Moving Image, where Danica got to see the Jim Henson exhibit for the first time. It was
What'd you
wonderful.
They have the clothes from Labyrinth. I lost my mind. It was spectacular.
We have a video on the site about that when Adam and the crew here visited back when New York Comic Con last year. Let's go through the museum list. Went to the Intrepid, got to see this shuttle Enterprise. Still looks good. That one's a little pricier, I think, of the museums. And
But
then
you're standing on an
I know.
aircraft carrier.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
and
yeah.
that's a space shuttle.
And you see the
Take my money.
I know. Yeah. You see some pretty cool airplanes on that deck. Although, again, 95 degrees, very humid.
And pregnant wife.
Yeah, exactly. that too. What was the other museum? Did we go to other museums? Is that it?
Weren't you going to a museum that had something on loan from the V&A? Yep.
Oh, so the Brooklyn Museum. We went 2 other ones, 3 other ones technically. Danica's gonna pull out some
Let's see if I
some
have the...
paraphernalia. The Brooklyn Museum was recommended by a friend of ours on Twitter, and it's a great museum. Again, also pay what you want to enter. It's a little bit long train ride from Manhattan. They had the last 2 weeks of the traveling David Bowie exhibit, which was from the V&A in London. Now, this is our big mistake. Our one big failure, I admit to this, was that we did not get tickets ahead of time, and so we were unable to go. We
that's a bummer.
stepped up there, and so it's one of those things where you couldn't just walk up to the front desk, pay the fee. You have to book a reservation time, and
make sure you have enough time to go through it, which was about 90 minutes is what they were suggesting.
Yeah, so we bought the book instead. Didn't get to see the clothes. Didn't get to see the memorabilia from David Bowie. The last museum we went to was the Met. The Met, which amazing art museum. It's it's New York's equivalent, America's equivalent of the Louvre, essentially, and they had the seasonal exhibit, which was Heavenly Bodies, the fashion exhibit, and that was emerging in the same space where they had all these relics and antiquities of 16th century castle. I don't know, of all these places, modern fashion.
If you're wondering why at the Met Gala so many people were in priest and nun-inspired clothing, it's because of that exhibit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So those are the museums we went to. The Cloisters, which is another spin-off of the Met, also had more of those costumes.
And beautiful staging. It was one of the best integrated exhibitions I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. And then we saw a bunch of shows. So we saw do we want to do the spoiler-free talk of In and of Itself first?
No, we'll save it all for the end.
We'll save it all for the end? Wow.
They've heard us talk about it in the show.
Well, we saw 3 other things. 3 other shows. One, Avenue Q.
Avenue Q is so enjoyable.
First time saw it. Hilarious.
Great message if you're unemployed.
Yeah.
If you're unemployed,
or fresh out of college,
show.
Right? It was really cool because it's an old show now, right? 15 years or so. So in 2003, now it doesn't seem as revolutionary of a musical. You have things like Hamilton, Book of Mormon,
but it's
a little
still
edgier,
funny and enjoyable.
It is, but you can tell where this set the tone and allowed shows like Book of Mormon to really have a place on Broadway.
Although I see it more as the precursor for like the Dirty Puppet movie that's about to come out, and Sausage Party, and all the things that are supposed to be pure and family friendly being not unfamily friendly, but it's dirty. I mean, Avenue Q's a little dirty.
Yeah,
totally. It was really funny because the place where we saw it was not on Broadway.
It was off Broadway.
Yes, it was an off-Broadway show, which is like just 2 blocks adjacent.
A
block adjacent. But it was basically a Cineplex for theater. It's called the New World Theater, and a multiplex. And you walk in, and we're on Broadway. You walk in these classic theaters that have been there forever.
Classic generally means uncomfortable and hot.
Well, beautiful architecture, lots of history, big
grand
foyers, and
all the things.
This was like going to your local AMC Cineplex, a multiplex, where they had like 5 different musicals, 5 different shows, and people would just go in and 2.5 hours and 45 minutes and you can buy drinks and
you use the same common space to get to your
that's cool.
to your theater.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting.
There's a couple smaller black box theaters like that here in San Francisco too. I like that.
Yeah, well, I liked it too, but it definitely it made it feel a little bit more like college theater as opposed to the grandness of.
But we were also seeing Avenue Q.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't need the grand experience for every show.
I do like the grand experience for some of this stuff, and
for some shows, but not for every single one.
We got the grand experience with Wicked. We saw Wicked. That was another show we saw. Got really good seats there. Gershwin Theater, massive, beautiful theater with so much history. Huge staircase. 2,000 people in the audience.
That has great staging. Just the end of the musical before the first intermission really hits a high note.
Yeah.
Literally.
Danica, you saw it there before.
I saw it. I was in New York for John and Hank doing their Carnegie Hall show in 2012, I want to say. And I saw it then. And it blew my mind then. It blows my mind now. Specifically because the costuming. The staging is amazing. But that costuming, especially with our seats, because I had further back seats the first time I saw it. And the second time we had, was it second row?
Something like that. Unobstructed view.
Unobstructed view. And to be that close and to have things happening right in front of you and to be able to actually see the workmanship. Not just the texture and the color, but the workmanship on those costumes. It's its own experience.
When I saw it, I was reasonably far away. So Galinda's costume is probably really spectacular up close because it seemed like you can see it shimmering like the entire time you're out in the crowd, but you don't see the detail.
It's the Oz folk, though.
Really?
That are the most...
The ensemble?
Yeah. All the Oz people.
It's one of those things where when you see a traveling show, when a show like Wicked, which goes on tour internationally, and when they have to adapt their production for... collapse it, put it in trucks, and then bring it to other theaters. There's only so much you can bring. There's the essentials. You got to bring, all the things that go behind the stage, but there's this dressing around the stage that you can't bring because they built one of those and it doesn't make sense. And sometimes there's facade versions of those. There are just printed screens. But to see the thing that they've put in place to play it for 10 plus years. 15 years. That was really cool.
Yeah, as an installation of the Gershwin Theater. That's not traveling.
And I mean, with pretty good seats, you can see like the sweat on the actors.
And the spittle.
And when they finish these big numbers and they're like breathing, like they're breathing not for effect. They're breathing because it's exhausting. Yeah.
And the subtleties of the performances, it's hard to actually, they have to translate so far behind or you're in front of them, but to have them that close to you and to be able to really see it.
That was wonderful. And then we did food, of course. You gave us a great recommendation for some Korean food at a place called Attaboy. It's A-T-O. A-T-T-O?
A-T-O.
A-T-O, B-O-Y.
B, yeah, you got it.
Something like that.
Attaboy.
Yep.
Yeah. Very different type
sort of
Korean food.
Refined Korean food.
They do a weird thing where it's like set menus. You pay a fixed price. You pick 3 things per person, small dishes, and every plate was really delicious.
Low light, concrete walls, very cool, very modern.
Yeah. So New York, hell of a town, great city. There's so many things on our list that we didn't get to do. The way we travel, we make a breakdown every day, hour by hour, and we had a long list of things that we wish we could have done. Someone who listens to the podcast reached out who works at a miniatures exhibit that's in downtown called Gulliver's Gate and invited us to the model shop, but did it after we got back. So next time. It'll have to be next time.
I usually pick a lane when I go to a big city like that, like something to focus on. So last time I was in New York, I did a lot of sports-related stuff. Like I went to a Yankees game and I went to all these hockey bars and that kind of stuff. But that's the only way I feel like I can digest the immensity of those places.
Yeah. So that's a recap of our New York trip without talking about in and of itself, which we'll
get
talk
to
about at the end of the show. So thanks for watching our carousel or listening to our carousel of home vacation.
We did not see Carousel, for the record.
No,
it was playing. Carousel. It was an option. We opted not.
Hey, let's talk about some pop culture.
Wow.
What?
Audio quality.
No, this is good. This goes well with seeing Glow Season 2 this weekend, or this week.
Oh, we miss Jeremy so much.
That was grander. A little more like if our music was sourced in a church organ.
Yeah.
No, I like how weird that was.
Oh, all right.
She mentioned Glow Season 2.
You want to start there?
Glow Season 2 is fucking great.
Did you watch all of it?
I have 2 episodes left.
We finished it last night.
Wow, you ended at a really high note. Episode 8 is like a full episode of Glow. Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but yes.
No,
it was a really good episode.
It was like an episode of the TV show.
Yeah.
As the episode. without any breaking the fourth wall.
They presented the edited
Yes, that's
content.
Highly recommended. It is the show about the real world Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling cult hit show in the late 80s. And the fictional telling. Season 1's about how the show came together, and season 2 is about their second season of making that show.
Mid-80s.
And if you
Mid-80s.
didn't know Alison Brie was a gigantic star, like this is just more proof.
Yeah.
On top of Community and Mad Men.
Everyone on that show.
Her range is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark Maron is, I feel like, just playing
He's
himself.
fantastic as Mark Maron.
He is, but I also see, I don't know, probably not intentional, but I do see some similarities between his character, and Sam Silva, and the director of Glow, and like Rick from Rick and Morty. That kind of abrasiveness, but also with a gentle heart.
And the competence. You
And-
get the sense that he is actually competent, if
Right.
not beaten down.
But
by
super
life.
abrasive and just hates everyone. And,
Yeah.
I just totally believe it when he does Lines of Coke that Mark Maron has done Lines of Coke before in his life.
Method. Real method. They cover some interesting topics and relatable topics, topical topics in the show, even though it's of the 80s. But they're definitely aware of when it's being watched in 2018.
Yeah.
Don't want to say too much without spoiling it. Highly recommend. It's on Netflix. Before we jump to the movie dives, because over the past week, I think collectively we saw like half a dozen movies. So we're going to talk about them. So get excited for that. We're going back to Thanos. Kishore, it's your moment to shine. So Avengers Infinity War has been out for over a month, and it's made like $1 billion already.
Yeah, it's made $2 billion. And like, first of all, let's set forth, like, I've seen people on Twitter call him a villain. He did nothing wrong. Let's get something straight. He did nothing wrong.
He has his perspective.
There's a whole community of us that believe
Us.
he did nothing wrong.
Us. Yeah. There's a subreddit called Thanos Did Nothing Wrong. And these are people for the lulz who like posting pictures about balance and supporting
Sometimes
Thanos.
very literally about balance.
Yep.
Sometimes a little more figurative.
Yeah, fans of Thanos acolytes. Well, they came up with the great idea that this community, of which is now over 300,000 members strong, if they're going to believe in Thanos so much, maybe they should follow through with Thanos' worldview, which
Practice
is
what they preach.
Exactly, which is to get rid of half of their community. So they got permission from the Reddit administrators to, on July 9th. I'm not sure exactly what time it is. If you want to participate, you can just sub to the Reddit and post a
Is
comment.
there any significance to this date, or is it just
They
arbitrary?
wanted to do it on July 4th, but then it didn't make any sense. It didn't make a lot of sense because the Reddit engineers were taking a day off, and it could cripple the system. Special privileges needed to be administered.
Okay.
So on July 9th, half of their users will be banned. Now, no one is
Permanently banned from that sub.
from that sub.
Yeah.
I think that's.
You want them banned from Reddit?
I want them to go full ban
Wow.
from Reddit.
Reddit
If you
isn't
were-
super interested in banning 150,000
Wow.
of their users.
I
Just
know.
FYI.
That's if you want to truly
no.
believe in
This
the
is hello
Hey, I'm
hater
the
Norm.
Mad Titan.
Hello hater Norm.
Hey, I'm game. Like, so much of my life has been lost to Reddit. A ban would probably do me good.
Practice what you preach. Get rid of all your votes. I believe it is just banned from the sub.
It's banned from the sub.
Now
It's
you're in
just
the
banned
sub,
from the
right?
sub.
So you are at
Of
risk.
course,
I'm
I'm
in
in the
may
sub.
be lost.
I am a big believer of the petition to have James Brolin come in on Reddit and execute the snap. I'm a big believer in that.
Like a
some people are
Snapchat snap.
Yeah, some people are petitioning to like save Spider-Man. Those people can go to hell.
Wow.
Like, that is not right.
Okay, this is hater Kishore.
Yeah, no, I don't like that Save Tom Holland petition that's going on in the sub.
You know, you can, if you are banned, you can always go to our Soul World, and hang out there.
Krator will be in there. Some good folks. That
No.
was a very deep cut. Sorry.
Internet. Sweet internet.
Ban the accounts for a year, and then when the next movie comes out, you can unban them.
Everyone has alts on
year.
Reddit anyways.
Exactly,
It was fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Practice what you preach.
I feel like this is really important.
This is fun Reddit. Most of Reddit is bad Reddit. This is fun Reddit. Let's just enjoy it.
Ride the wave. I hope. Do you want to exist? Like, are you hoping you get banished? Like, actually?
No, I have no strong feelings either way. You know the neutral world in Futurama? I have no feelings one way or another about this issue.
Okay.
I'm willing to let whatever may come.
That's okay. That's very, very peaceful. Of course, this just makes me think of The Leftovers.
Yeah. So, movies that we all saw. Let's start with Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Oh, guys.
So this is the Mr. Rogers documentary.
I don't even know where to begin. It was, I bawled throughout this movie because seeing, even though, it presents, what you expect to be a very uplifting story of Mr. Rogers, it actually didn't, it showed some sides that were challenging. Mm-hmm. And it showed, how he was. What was brilliant about it is that we live in an age that is so much information being thrown at us, and it seems at times that the world is not kind, or there are not kind people here. And when you watch that documentary, you saw how much he just totally cared about kids. And even when you could see the filmmakers try to like poke at that a little bit, was he really like this? Mm-hmm. And then everyone on set talking about it. And I'll just share one poignant moment. It's like a very mild spoiler, but the actor that played Officer Clemens, an African-American guy, he was gay, and Fred told him that he couldn't come out on the show because they wouldn't let that be.
The sponsors would pull the show in the 70s.
Yeah, and that's a really tough conversation to have with somebody.
It's something that, as a documentarian, I'm glad they addressed, because it wasn't just all the
it wasn't
the positivity.
All. And but you get to this moment later where every time like Officer Clemens would come on, like Mr. Rogers would say something to the effect of like, "I love you," and something like that. And after a couple of years, that actor realized like Mr. Rogers was not saying that in character; he was saying that to him, and how much that meant to him. And like there was that was an incredibly touching moment. Like admits this like denial of who this person is on some level, still just loving him for who he was. I thought that was beautiful. I thought it was an antidote for everything that is happening around us, good, bad, or otherwise.
Hugely relevant today, and they again they are aware of that. The things they talk about and how Mr. Rogers was brought back to address 9/11, and his perspective of wanting to change not only children's education but kind of change the world, and how he didn't know if he was a success or a failure. And if you look at the world today, you can see that would still apply.
But even I feel like they did a really good job of also showcasing some of his vulnerabilities as a human. Like, this is not someone to actually be fully deified. Like, he had his own issues.
For sure.
And it's a nice, well-rounded portrait of him.
I had no idea even though I watched the show growing up, I had no idea they leaned into so many controversial topics.
So this is a thing where the show ran from the 60s to, what is it, 90s, late 80s?
2000 was the last show.
Really? Okay.
But it went off and then they brought it back.
Right. So did you guys both grow up watching reruns, or watching, like, what is the Mr. Rogers in your head? The grayness of the hair, how youthful he was, like which version of the show did you watch?
I definitely saw a slightly older one. Most of the Mr. Rogers we saw in the movie was at one end, like much older.
Yeah, 60s, early 70s.
Or they early. That was like younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw something in between those.
And so kids grew up in the 80s, right? Or even, I would even dare say, the early 90s, could watch those reruns and they would still feel like they would apply or be, because those shows were timeless. For kids growing up in the aughts or today, you can't really watch Mr. Rogers and not have it feel dated.
Right. The pacing of it, the way that it's edited, the way that the structure of it doesn't.
Well, even they were saying in the documentary, even back then, it was an out of place show.
Yeah.
So it was always, but now, like, because of just the availability of media and in the quality of the television, like just the visual quality, audio quality, it will look dated no matter what.
Yeah.
But it was out of place on purpose.
Yeah, no,
right.
yeah, the structure and so I wonder what's the last generation of kids who could actually earnestly watch Mr. Rogers as educational television growing up and not have to watch Daniel Tiger.
Yeah.
Like, does your kid grow up watching Mr. Rogers?
No, because it wasn't anywhere available. I mean, I also grew up in Pittsburgh, and I watched Mr. Rogers on WQED, which is like the channel where he filmed all of that stuff. And like,
dude.
he's from Pittsburgh, so there was there's part of the cultural fabric of where I grew up. And while it's not realistic for shows to look like that now, I do think what I walk away with is appreciating just a little bit more the idea of silence in my life and acknowledging the complexity of children's feelings once more.
Yeah.
All right. From Mr. Rogers, from Won't You Be My Neighbor, which again, highly recommended. 99% Rotten Tomatoes, only one negative review.
Who is that? Who are you?
Yeah, I'm not going to call them out. You can look it up yourself, but apparently that person thought that they did not go deeper into the complexity of Mr. Fred Rogers, the human, which I can I understand.
I mean, this guy who was around for that long. I mean, they did it in like 90 minutes. I mean, if you want to do a Ken Burns miniseries, you could do it, but that's not what this is.
All right, well, let's go in a different direction.
Let's go into a big blockbuster, $200 million movie with Jurassic World. Have you seen this yet, Kishore?
Nope, not gonna.
We saw this. We saw this in New York because we had nothing to do at
and it was
11 p.m.
degrees at 11 p.m.
Yeah, Times Square Theater. But we saw this in Dolby Cinema in New York, and what a great ad for Dolby Cinema. To not say a lot about, because the movie is still in theater, I don't want to go into spoilers. I think being disappointed by Jurassic World and not having to hold that franchise up on a pedestal anymore, let me enjoy Fallen Kingdom a lot. And I really enjoyed it as a dinosaur / monster movie.
But as a Jurassic Park movie, it's very disappointing.
It's just mediocre. I mean, not disappointing because I had no expectations.
Yeah.
Ugh,
I thought it was going to be
much.
much worse. I thought it was going to be awful.
But watching that movie with the amazing sound design, the thundering effects, the incredible practical visuals, and of course CG visuals in something like Dolby Cinema, really, really made that experience for us. Yeah. So if you're gonna watch Jurassic World, go watch it in like a Dolby Cinema or an IMAX or in some place where you can really feel the dinosaurs.
And if you're on the fence and you thought the first one was shit, go see it. It definitely has value.
Yeah. And then we also saw Ocean's 8. I know it's been out for over a month now, but we had just gone to the Met, and so we decided to it's takes place in the Met.
Except the original, the Frank Sinatra one, which is weird, I think.
Yeah. We also just watched that one.
Oh. I find the Ocean's movies pretty enjoyable as popcorn movies. How did this sort of rank in the Ocean's world?
I would say better than 2.
2 was not good. Or 12.
Yeah, better than 12, not as good as 11, and I enjoyed it more than 13. I'll say that.
Yeah, I would also go along with that.
Oh, that's pretty good then.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a very long film. It's not over-labored. Mm-hmm. It's good. It's enjoyable. Parts of it are, of course, very predictable, but not in a way where you're just like, why am I watching this?
But they kind of stick to their lane, like, this is a heist movie, and we're going to have fun doing it, and it's going to be quirky
very
and
much.
funny. That's great.
I definitely feel like Anne Hathaway had the most fun as an actress on this film, but everybody looked like they were enjoying it.
I just want to hang out with Cate Blanchett a little while.
Yeah.
Does anyone else feel that way?
All the time.
I want to know what her skin regimen is. She hasn't aged since like the Queen Elizabeth series.
No.
I don't understand that. I get it. She's the goddess of death. But I mean, still.
Yeah.
And also an elf.
Yeah.
High elf.
See, that one makes sense. She has magical powers.
Yes, porcelain. And then movies coming out this week. Well, I don't see a lot of fanfare about this, but Ant-Man and the Wasp. is out today.
I haven't heard much hype either, but it's a Marvel movie. It'll be good.
It's a Marvel movie. It's well reviewed. From all reports, if you like the idea of, if you like the first one that Peyton Reed did, you'll and that one of course had some pre-production problems because it was originally directed and written by Edgar Wright. Then he left, and we never know what his vision of that film was going to be. But you can kind of see glimpses of it when they brought Peyton Reed in to direct it, which I thought he did a fine job. Really solid action hero movie with great comic bits. And then if you're waiting for Evangeline Lilly to get into the costume, looks like she's gonna be a big part of this movie.
And that costume is awesome.
The costume looks really, really good. And Michael Douglas and some other, if you haven't watched the trailers, I won't say who else is in the film, but it's based in San Francisco. So
I got to give a shout out to a couple things. I saw her on Evangeline Lilly doing junket interviews, and the men of the Marvel Cinematic Universe have been complaining about the uncomfortableness of the outfits. Evangeline Lilly put them in their place. It is very enjoyable. She said the outfit's not that bad.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand why the guys are complaining.
Oh, it's because they don't have to wear uncomfortable outfits every day.
That's true. I'm actually most excited. I'm actually pretty hyped about this movie. Not so much because I'm invested in the characters. It's more that I'm excited about the return to a smaller movie. We've had really, really big Marvel movies lately, like Civil War and Infinity War and whatnot. So the idea of something small, even Black Panther felt like a really big movie.
Yeah.
And so something like smaller that might be heisty or crime based in some way. I have no idea what this movie is about.
Well, they have so much more freedom if you're in one of those in-between films where you can be more quirky and you don't have to set everything up for what's coming next. You can just enjoy the ride that you're on.
So that's the other thing for people watching this, because it is coming out after Infinity War. Don't expect a huge tie-in. This is not a post-Infinity War story. This is supposed to happen before those events. So everything, the movie that you'll be looking forward to is Captain Marvel before the next Avengers film. And then on the horizon, things not coming out on theaters, but for the small screen, we have Netflix's new animated show, which dropped the trailer, Disenchantment.
If you're like, Futurama is the best show that's existed on TV ever.
Well,
I got something for you. Matt Groening has a new show.
Yeah.
That is basically Futurama set in fantasy world.
Huge, same art style.
Same voice cast, basically.
Very self-aware, and we hope it will do for swords and sandals and fantasy and dragons what Futurama did for science fiction.
Yeah, it's already, and it'll be on Netflix, which I'm totally enjoying because I find Futurama very bingeable, and it's actually done really well on Netflix. And so I'm excited from that perspective.
Not only is Futurama bingeable, you can leave it on in the background. It's just like it's reliable, put on any time because it's so dense.
And snappy dialogue.
And there's so many seasons.
I'm going to say something slightly controversial too. I think Family Guy's gotten a lot of hate so far just because of how repetitive it is in terms of its comedy. But I think even Rick and Morty, for as brilliant it is, has moved the comedy needle for animated stuff over to this crassness corner that I think Futurama had some heart to it. So I'm hoping this will have some heart, like a lot of Matt Groening stuff will. And I feel like that's a welcome place right now. Awesome. I'm being super nostalgic and warm and fuzzy this week.
Yeah.
Hey, I lost my edge.
Well,
dude, you got a kitten this week.
Yeah, that's why.
Going deeper into nostalgia, you and I, Kishore, big fans of Deep Space Nine.
Oh,
I only point that out because Jeremy was not a fan when we introduced him to the pilot episode, the emissary.
He doesn't realize that you have to slog through the first couple seasons. He's like Star Trek spoiled.
And maybe the thing that will convince him is the DS9 documentary that is now not only has been in the works but is now wrapped up its editing phase. It's picture locked. The producer, the former showrunner of DS9, I believe the writer of the Rules of Acquisition, Ira Stephen Bear, is working on this doc, and they have done for this documentary what they Paramount or CBS did for Next Generation, which is restore some of the footage. They're not going to do a whole series restoration
Someday.
I don't think so, because TNG didn't make the money they had hoped. The first season made a lot of money when they released that on Blu-ray, and then they kind of rushed, I think, the restoration of the rest of the seasons, and overall it cost more than it did I mean, in the long run, the long tail, it'll all work out, but there's no immediate urgency.
Did you watch this show?
I never watched the show. I was busy playing sports.
This documentary I'm really excited about because as much as I love this show, this is my favorite track. The behind the scenes stuff was really, really gnarly. Like there was like love triangles happening behind the scenes.
I feel like I don't need to watch the show to enjoy a good documentary and the human drama, the behind the scenes human drama. Totally in for it.
As long as you understand the universe and it will be about not only making the show, but its relationship with the fans and its place in science fiction lore, and that you can appreciate.
Well, I'm lucky that I have a in-house explainer of any gaps of my nerd knowledge.
I'm trying to hold back some of the explaining. Working on it. There's no release date yet for the documentary. I think the Star Trek Las Vegas convention that's coming up, they're going to be showing some content there with some panels. I don't think they're doing a screening, though. But whenever that comes out, it will be, I'll go rent it or buy it. And then the big movie announcement this week that is deep into nostalgia, especially if you're into Japanese culture, and I think it was announced at Anime Expo down in LA that's happening right now, is a live-action Mobile Suit Gundam movie is happening, produced by Legendary Entertainment. So the people who did the Warcraft movie and the Dark Knight trilogy, they have the bucks, they have the expertise, and they have partnered with Sunrise to do a live-action Gundam movie. Yeah.
Are you hype about this?
I love the look of Gundam. I admit that I'm not incredibly familiar with the story of Gundam, but yes. Hell yes, I'm excited for this.
I would be interested in who's going to write the script, because it doesn't matter how good something looks, things can go epically wrong.
You know what Norm wants. Norm just wants like 2 hours of people kit bashing.
Yeah.
I mean, we got for Western audiences, Pacific Rim was like was highly influenced by Gundam and mech culture, and we got a lot of the fan appreciation for that in Ready Player One, with Gundam being a part of Ready Player One. But to have an earnest take, and this isn't the first Gundam movie that's been done. There's been animated Gundam movies. I think there's been some live ones that were made in Japan. This is the first one with a big budget, made for international audiences as well as Western audiences. I hope they make a good movie, and it's not going to be the derivative film. It's going to be the source material. The synopsis says that the original Gundam is set in the universal century, the era which humanity's growing population has led people to emigrate into space colonies, and eventually the people living in the colonies seek their autonomy. Sounds like The Expanse, actually, and launch a war of independence against the people living on Earth.
That sounds exactly like The Expanse.
Exactly like The Expanse.
I mean, like finite universe, finite resources. I think I know of one solution.
Although this will have better merchandising than The Expanse.
Oh, I haven't thought about that.
How have you not thought
Expanse
about that?
has the worst merchandising, like nothing.
Whoa.
But the merch here is going to be amazing.
Collectible.
There goes your baby's college fund.
Or that's where they'll be kept until I can sell them again.
No, it's the resentment of the child to the father for not being able to play with Papa's toys.
These are not children's toys.
These are collectibles.
You got to watch that SNL commercial for Star Wars toys. Oh, we'll show them. There's a great SNL parody commercial that I believe is good parenting advice for you.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
And then finally, a bit of economics of the movie business. Netflix is experimenting with a new tier of pricing. Now, do you even know, let's go poll both of you. And you guys out there listening, you can also play along. How much does Netflix cost per month? Let's go, Danica. How much does Netflix cost per month?
Is it like $14.99?
Sure.
So I'm on a legacy plan. So it's still $10 a month for me because I have a 2-device plan, but I believe for new subscribers it's $12.
$12 a month, and that's is that a standard subscription, or does that include 4K?
That does not include 4K, I do not believe.
So you have to pay more. So I think it's close to, you're right, about $15 a month if you want the full package.
To fancy pants it?
Yeah, and it used to be one price, all you can eat media. But Netflix is running at a huge deficit right now. Yeah, they have 175 million subscribers. They're making $1 billion. It's 175 million subscribers, and maybe not billion because it's different pricing worldwide. They're making a lot of money, but they're also running at a deficit at like $6 billion or so because of licensing and original programming. They got to find new revenue streams, and just like Amazon, they want to be in a place where you can't live without them, and so they want to charge more for new services, such as, well, not new shows, but new quality of shows, or quality, the visual quality or the audio quality. Right now, you have HD, you have 4K. There's going to be 4K HDR, Dolby Vision. There's going to be potentially audio, Dolby Atmos that they can add on. All these things are things that they can potentially segment into a higher price $20 subscription model, which is their Ultra tier, which they've now started experimenting with overseas.
Ultra.
What's weird about the Netflix tiers, and the reason I don't rebel against them so much, is I don't feel upsold as I do in so many other things. Like Hulu, you turn that thing on, you could be paying for Hulu, and they're like, do you want to pay more? Here's more options for you. It's constant. Netflix is like, you don't know that all these tiers exist until you decide you need something that the service doesn't have.
Sucks for me, because for anyone who bought like a 4K HDR TV, you're like, oh, I thought I was going to get all the HDR stuff for free. Now I'm going to factor in another $100 a year.
I think what's hard about this is I always made the factor that Netflix was on par with what HBO cost, and now it's starting to surpass that number.
Yeah. And as all these services start charging more, what is the limit that you'd pay monthly? It's probably more than what you previously paid, let's say, 7-8 years ago when you were just buying cable and internet. Now you're paying for internet, maybe more for internet for gigabit, and you're paying mobile plans, and you're paying for half a dozen subscription services, which all want to raise their rates, by 10-20%. Yeah, it's 125 million subscribers worldwide right now for Netflix, 57 in the U.S. So they're making like $700 million in the U.S. a month, which is a lot. But they're also running at a $10 billion deficit in terms of how much their cash flow is. And then the other thing that people are paying monthly now, well, MoviePass. And I want to talk about, I know this is a little bit tech. Should we jump into tech? Should we lead this off in the tech segment?
No, we can just talk about this really quick.
All right, we'll talk about it real quick.
Are you MoviePass?
We are not MoviePass subscribers. Now, MoviePass, I know Ryan is and Joey is, and they've made the most out of their $100 a year spend to watch movies. But their experience has been kind of hit and miss because unless it's all GPS based, right? You have to be close to the theater. In certain theaters, it doesn't work, and you can only watch the movie once. And there are more restrictions. Now, MoviePass, a new restriction that they're adding is a surcharge for peak pricing. Basically.
So like opening weekend, like the no passes thing that we're so used to hearing about at movie theaters. Is that what we were talking about?
It's basically an extra $3, and you'll get like a notification for certain showings because it's highly impacted.
See, this is why I never liked MoviePass. I made so many jokes about it, but I never felt like month to month MoviePass would always stay the same. Like it was constantly changing underneath your feet, and that's no fun.
And the promos were constantly changing too. Subscribe now, and it's a certain price. If you subscribe 2 weeks later, it might be a different price. And none of us know if that company is going to be around in 6 months. Well, the companies that we are pretty sure will be around in 6 months are the actual movie theater chains themselves, and they have started their own subscription services to compete with MoviePass. Cinemark, which has the Century Theaters, has one that I believe you are a subscriber
I'm a member of. We went to see The Incredibles, and at some point I was just like, it's just cheaper if I just join the movie club right now to go see this movie with the three of us.
Yeah.
So I joined, and it actually has convinced me to go see more movies.
Did you do that on your own accord, or was there a kiosk where people are like, redeem your ticket and get the first month off?
I did it of my own accord because I was like, I want to buy tickets ahead of time, and if you're this this service no online charges for buying tickets.
So recap, what are the benefits of the
So
Cinemark one?
this one isn't that great, but it just works because it's the closest movie theater for me. So it's $8.99 a month. You get
that's $9 a month.
$9 a month. You get one ticket. Add-on tickets are $9 additional. So basically, every movie costs $9. There's like a surcharge if you go to like some 3D kind of whatever.
Sure.
And you get 20% off at concessions, no online booking fees. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
$9 a movie is basically it.
So $9. Basically, they're banking on you watching at least one movie a month for $9, and incentivizing you to not only watch more movies because it's $9 with your friends or more movies for you, and also the discounts on the food.
Yeah.
Right.
For me, it was like, if I go to like, I don't know, 10 movies a year, this will be worth it.
Very cool. All right. Yeah. 10 movies. Yeah. That makes sense. One movie a month. AMC, we talked about this, has their new subscription plan as well. It's called the Stubbs A-List. This one, pricier, $20 a month. But it does let you go IMAX and Dolby Cinema.
Yeah.
And it's 3 movies a week.
And so you have the subscription. What does it cost to take a lady friend?
You
A
have
special
to.
lady
A
friend.
special lady friend.
There is no family plan.
Wait, I should reverse this. You have this plan. What does it cost to take Norm? Because there is cost to take Norm to a movie.
He's on his own. He had to sign up too.
Oh, so you both got subscriptions?
Yeah.
You both have,
Wow.
yeah, you basically have to sign up for 2 subscriptions and then have the phones next to each other to coordinate the matching of seats. There's no, and that's a fundamental
That kind
problem.
of stinks.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Not ideal, but also it's still such an amazing value.
We actually haven't, we signed up for it literally this morning because we're going to use it for Ant-Man and the Wasp. And the thing that tipped us over to do it was counting the number of movies that we knew we wanted to see in Dolby Cinema the rest of this year. And we're like, yeah, I can see I want to see 10 movies in Dolby Cinema.
Don't you have to see about 2 movies a month to make that worthwhile?
Dolby Cinema is $24 a
What?
ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was worth it to see one movie in Dolby Cinema
Yeah.
to make
Holy
it worthwhile.
cow.
I wish we had bought it before seeing Jurassic World because
Yeah.
that would have.
Well, you should
done it
have
for this
just
month.
not seen that movie based on your review.
But yeah, I will let you know in a week's time what
Yeah.
that experience is like because they're supposed to check your ID when you get there, and so there's this whole process.
I'm starting to get a little frustrated and tired of all these subscription plans. Like I get like I sign up for them, but every single, just how fragmented they are.
Yeah.
I'm like Prime and all of this stuff. It's just becoming like a whole world of subscription.
You know, there's a business opportunity for people out there who want to start an intermediate service. One login for all of your accounts, one place to manage it, so you can just lump up and just see, and one password for everything. I think that's what Apple will do.
Yeah.
Apple, and they'll take their 30% cut. If you look at like how much you've spent on Spotify over whenever since you signed up, I signed up for Spotify like when it launched essentially, and it will astound you. It will be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And if you think about the number of albums you've listened to or would have bought in that time, it would have been better off for you to just buy the albums.
I don't know about that.
Better in terms of the monetary equivalent, but what you're paying for is convenience. You're paying for not having to rip anything. You're paying for the streaming ease of access.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that bums me out is sometimes they lose the license and songs that were previously available on Spotify, the albums go away, and that's what I don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for music, I think of you think of music, and you think of TV shows differently. Music is constantly, eminently re-listenable, re-consumable, and TV shows a little bit less so much. The cycling makes more sense with visual content. Anyway, that's just a little bit of rant to wrap up the pop culture minute. And I don't even think we have music cues for technology.
Well, I think after our previous music cues that we're just going to ignore future cues and just say, it's time for tech news. Oh, that one actually sounds fine.
I think you should double down and
Really
go
low.
as weird as possible. Just weird.
All right, technology news. We're going to talk about some car news because our buddy and previous co-host of This Is Only a Test announced... Whoa.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Who would
Is that
dare?
me? Jesus Christ, that was weird.
That sound cue worked.
Yeah, no. Our friend, previous co-host of this podcast, Gary, would announce that he's going to buy a Tesla Model X.
Model X? Why
Model
an X?
X.
Because he's fancy.
Well, I think because he has a family, he has a kid, and he wants an SUV for the family. So he went on a test drive just yesterday and did ludicrous mode. And I think that sold him on it.
Why do you ever need ludicrous mode?
It's about knowing that you could.
No. I don't think he's buying ludicrous. I don't think anyone buys.
No, but it
ludicrous mode.
Is fun.
The test drive. I don't think you've ever done ludicrous mode. Danica.
I have not, and
yeah.
I'm surprised that you enjoy it because you don't like roller coasters. I love roller coasters. I'm into it.
I think it's a little different with the car because you can control. It's probably more dangerous in the car than it is in a roller coaster. Do ludicrous mode. Put on, the one time I got to ride ludicrous mode was when at the Model X launch event, waiting in line till 3 a.m. and it woke me up. It is a jolt, that amount of immediate acceleration. Super interesting for Gary. I'm so curious what his experience will be with range anxiety and for charging and to move on to a full electric vehicle. 1 month into our ownership of the 3, I'm now keeping it in the garage more and plugged in more because that's just my force of habit now.
Yeah.
As opposed to the owning a car and taking it to, if you had a gas car, what Jeremy said was the biggest change for him from moving from a gas car to an electric car was not going to the gas station. The ritual of going to the gas station once every 2 weeks or once every week to fill up, not having to do that was just a change in operating procedure that he welcomed.
Yeah.
But having the electric car, it's not like if you had a gas station at home. You can't treat it like that because you're not filling up once every 2 weeks or once every week. You're kind of topping off as opposed to filling up. You're topping off every night. And they encourage that because that's how you keep the batteries healthy. They're, giant lithium batteries that have vampire drain overnight. If you don't drive the car for a week, we left the car in a parking lot for a week while we were in New York, and if we didn't have a full tank, quote unquote, a full battery, I would have been worried about the charge and getting home from the airport.
But can't you see what the battery is from an app?
Right? Yes, you can.
You can see everything from
You can see everything, and I want to really. There is a mode that you can, like a vacation mode, to really shut down the car so you don't have a battery drain. Checking the battery, like if you checking the battery actually drains the battery because it wakes the car.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
so you don't want to do that.
But can it? I would imagine there's like some sort of push notification if the battery goes below some percent or something.
Nope. They just want you to leave it plugged in and then have it cycle and have it stay at that kind of 80%
it feels
charge.
much more like you're charging your iPhone.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It really feels like you leave it charged. And so while
and the same paranoia of I need to make sure that it's fully charged because I'm going to be using it a lot, and paranoia about
20% left on the iPhone is a terrifying thing because not only are you about to lose your power on your phone, right, you have to be more cautious in how you use it, but also you're damaging the battery because you really don't want to have it go to zero. That affects the lifespan of the battery. You want to keep it between that 30 and 80%. Having 20% of a full tank of gas in the car, not really that bad. You don't want to go to zero, but 20% of a normal tank in the car is what, like 60 miles left? That's okay. You can get home, and I wouldn't be freaked out.
I'm disappointed in this, and maybe there is like a technical reason behind all of this, but I'm disappointed because it means you're going to be using more energy on your car than what you probably initially calculated.
That is the behavioral cost of owning an electric car that we're now discovering, is that you can't calculate it as if I'm only going to drive 100 miles a week or 200 miles a week, and the equivalent of the watt hours and cost for that is what, like $5. Oh, it's only $5 a week. No, you're actually going to probably use more like $6 between the battery drain and getting it plugged in. It's like you've got to factor in an extra 10%.
That's not even a movie club worth of
No, it's not
money.
It's just like those are the things that at scale you have to think about. Yeah. The other thing with Tesla news is they finally shipped 5,000 Model 3s in a week. They built 7,000 cars in a week. This was largely partly done by building a third assembly line in a giant tent at their Fremont factory with parts, spare parts from the other assembly lines, and of course new parts as well. But they built a full assembly line in, I believe, not even an air-conditioned tent, just to ramp up production because they need to make that. But they did, by the end of June, get 5,000 cars made, not necessarily delivered though. So we'll see what's going to happen there. They also, and this is something frustrating for some people who did pre-order their Model 3s, they opened up the next step of the ordering system to everyone. So if you, back in April 1st, 2016, put $1,000 down on a Model 3, you were put into a queue, right? Some people waited in line outside the Tesla stores and put $1,000 down, an interest-free deposit for Elon Musk. And you assume that the earlier you put your money down, the sooner you would get your Model 3. People know that's not the case, really, because it's really more about how much you want to spend. If you want that $35,000 car, you're going to wait till next year probably. If you wanted the all-wheel drive model, which they just, and the performance model, you have to wait a little longer because that wasn't fully ramped up in production. Now, this past week, they opened up the next step of pre-order, the extra $2,500 you have to put down as a next down payment to configure your car. That puts you in a separate queue. If you had pre-ordered your Model 3, put that $1,000 down 6 months ago, and you were quick to act on the next step of the $2,500 down, you would get your car sooner than someone who would order on April 1st, 2016 and still hasn't put in their configuration yet.
This is why I was a proponent of just order people by number of Twitter followers in the queue. That's why the people that have really earned it put in the time.
Really earned it. Their clout score.
Yeah.
That's right. High clout score.
Wow.
Oh, R.I.P. clout. Pour one out for clout.
And of course, they wanna upsell you on everything. You only can order, if you want to deliver in the next 6 months, order the long range battery right now, the premium offerings. It's not a $35,000 car. It's more like a $50,000 to $60,000 car right now,
which makes sense where they are, which is like they're burning cash, and
so they want to get to profitability.
They want the higher margin vehicles out first,
and people are ready for their cars.
And it's a $9,000 price difference between the standard range and the long range, of which I don't know how much the batteries cost, but I don't think they cost $9,000. That's, even if they cost half as much, that's a pure profit of $5,000 that they're making on the long range cars. It's like $20,000 if you're on a Model X and you want to get between the 75 kilowatt hour versus the 100 kilowatt hour. That's crazy. Margin.
You have Tesla on the brain.
Yeah.
Like, tell you, once you own one, it's all you think.
It's also annoying because he has perfect recall.
Mm-hmm. Did you know that you were having 2 children when you bought this car?
She knew. Whoa.
When we talk about
choose your answer wisely.
When we talk about delivery date, it needed to be specified if we're talking about Baby Chan or the Model 3.
She's gonna have 3 children real soon.
What, are you the third child?
I am the first child.
The oldest always gets his way.
All right, moving on.
I have nothing to say about that.
Nothing. Let's move on from electric cars because we're running out of time a little bit, and I do want to talk about in and of itself. Let's go through things real quick. HTC, bummer. They had to lay off about 1,500 employees again.
This is the second layoff this year. It makes you wonder what they're going to focus on. I think analysts are thinking they're going to pull back from the smartphone thing and focus more on VR. I wonder what this means for VR, especially with the Google acquisition, in terms of what they're going to emphasize. I realize this is in the VR minute, but that's what strikes me as being the most interesting about this. This has been coming for a while.
Yep. Other smartphone news, not necessarily great news, but Samsung did their annual reports, and they were, while they made more money, up 5%, it was below their estimates because of weak Galaxy 9 sales. I think The momentum for their Galaxy phones is waning a little bit.
Yeah, when your 8 sets fire to a bunch of stuff, like maybe.
Well,
I mean, I know that was the
think
note.
they've recovered from the battery fires.
But
well.
I think that took a little while, and it allowed much more competition from other Android manufacturers, including the Pixel, which I think has done surprisingly well compared to the Galaxy 9.
And I think the Pixel has done well because users are believing more in the control end-to-end. Google makes the OS. They announced the Pixel with the new. You're going to get the newest operating system, Android version, sooner. That's what they care about for people who are dedicated, hardcore Android users on the high end. If you just want an Android phone, an alternative on the medium range, you're not going to buy the latest Galaxy S9. You're going to want something a little cheaper. You're going to settle for something and be totally okay with it, because we have reached a peak point where these new features are not super essential. As long as they have a good camera, you're pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Good video, good photos. That's the killer app. Good messaging. As long as you can use Snapchat, as long as you know, Hangouts, you're good. Sonos is filing an IPO. So this is really interesting to me because I don't see a huge path forward for this company moving into the home audio space. They did announce a new bar.
I think they're going to get crowded out by Amazon and Google making these devices.
Yeah, and they have integration, with the services, but it really is moving in a space where Apple tried to move in, and Apple has highly integration with their HomePod, and Apple couldn't find success with the HomePod. Their big selling point originally was connected devices, mesh network throughout the house. That is a software problem.
And now everyone else has solutions.
And everyone has versions of that.
I think the only competitive advantage is what Bose does, which is our stuff sounds better.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Premium. And that's becoming less of an advantage.
And that came from a place when Bose was legacied into that from a history of having high-end home theater hardware and the Bose brand being really strong. Sonos wasn't necessarily, they have good audio quality, but weren't necessarily known for that. And I know brand goes a long way for home theater enthusiasts, for, I shouldn't say mainstream home theater people. But there's so many high-end audio brands to compete with. And then do we have final few stories?
Oh, I just want to recommend for fans of Grant Imahara.
Oh, yes.
He announced that he has been working for Disney Imagineering for the past, I think, 6 to 9 months, something like that. And they showed a video of his project. Did you see this video?
I did not see it.
It's super cool.
Crazy. So everyone knows Grant is a robot maker, and he's been building next-generation robots for Disney, but they're designed to be stunt robots and replace stunt people in movie scenes and in live action scenes at the parks. And so it's a way of sort of modeling what these parks can do just using robots. And it's amazing tricks of torsion and balance that
acrobatics. They have scenes of robots, humanoid robots with arms and legs, catapulting themselves, being like superheroes, without the cape. So you can imagine like an Iron Man robot or an Ant-Man robot at a future Disney theme park doing a crazy stunt hundreds of feet in the air, where you never let a human do that. And maybe the performances will be mixed. It'll be Disney magic, where you'll be a costume performer doing most of the on-stage stuff, and then we'll sneak behind and have the robot do the dangerous stunt.
The video is brilliant, too, because you just watch it. It's like watching a Boston Dynamics video, except less scary.
And I'm curious whether the engineering challenge is easier because of...
Balance has been one of those things that humanoid robots has struggled with for so long. And while he has the advantage of momentum here, which helps stabilize a lot of things, I think it's still a massive problem to engineer around, just because the parts that are involved, at least up until a few years ago, weren't designed for that kind of balance.
But you're talking about environments and variables that are locked down. They know the force and the vectors and trajectories of these catapults and these launchers, and they know where they're going to be landing, and so it's about repetition, because these are performances. These aren't robots, autonomous robots in the real world.
Yeah, and if it doesn't look good, if it doesn't read as natural, it's not gonna work.
It did look
yeah,
natural,
because that's what I would be like. Maybe it's just my eye where I'm really good when it comes to looking at edits of things and knowing what is CG, what is animated, what is this, and just being pulled completely out of something if it looks like crap or is too detectable. That's its own challenge.
It's funny what people pick up on. I was talking to a science advisor for a bunch of Hollywood films, and he talked about in a lot of space films, one of the things people pick up on is their expectation of what's right, but not actually what might be right in the situation too. So you expect when you throw a ball up in the air that it'll just it'll reach its top and fall back down and slow down what it does. So even though like certain situations on spaceships where that's not what the physics say would happen, that's the expectation the audience has.
Yeah.
So it's understanding what the expectation the audience has for what will happen. It's not that the robot can jump 100 feet high. Like, we can kind of suspend our disbelief for that.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't like kind of slow down at its apex before coming back down, it'll look wrong to us.
Yeah.
And then, we'll save this next story for a moment of science. But before we move on to that, I want to thank the sponsor of this week's episode of This Is Only Test. And again, that is Huawei's MateBook X Pro, winner of 27 awards at Mobile World Congress, including Best of Show Laptop, Best Innovation, Best Design, Editor's Choice, and Reader's Choice. With Windows Hello, you can unlock your Huawei MateBook X Pro with a touch of your fingerprint. Secure, fast, and no password to remember. Huawei's MateBook X Pro is now available at Microsoft stores, Amazon, and Newegg.com. For a limited time, get a free $300 gift card with purchase and visit a Microsoft store near you today. Now, our next segment, do we have a music cue for that? I don't think.
Although I would just like to point out that Norm got recognized in an elevator based solely on his voice while we were in New York.
Nicely done.
I don't remember that.
I do.
He blocks the fans. He just doesn't remember them at all. All right, it's just time for Moment of Science. Well, now it's time for a Moment of Science. Scott Pruitt got fired while he resigned yesterday, and I think a lot of scientists are rejoicing. I say, wait 1 second before we rejoice. So some editorializing. Sorry for just some minor politics here. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
That guy was the worst. He was at best really bad at his job. At worst, he was just straight up corrupt.
Yeah.
And like all of the personal scandals of expenses and using government resources to fund his own.
There were 19 open probes that they were investigating. 19.
You never want 19 open probes in you.
This is true. This is 100% true. So regardless of how you feel about climate change, that guy was a disaster.
And he was weird. There was a weirdo factor with him that is still completely unexplained.
His resignation letter is disconcerting, to say the least. He's being replaced by Andrew Wheeler. And so Scott Pruitt came to the administration because he was an oil and gas lobbyist. And he specialized in suing the government, particularly the EPA, under the previous administration, challenging how much governmental control they can actually enforce in regulating certain things like CO2. Andrew Wheeler, who's taking his job, was a coal lobbyist for a number of years. He actually was a staffer for Senator James Inhofe from Oklahoma, who's the snowball senator.
Yeah,
he
famous climate denier.
He took a snowball onto the floor to prove that global warming wasn't happening. How was New York this week? It was good.
God.
Yeah, it was great. But anyways, so I don't expect many policy changes here, but I will say I think I'm not rejoicing that Scott Pruitt's gone because not much is going to change in terms of their policy towards climate change. I don't think we're anywhere closer to re-entering the Paris Accords, which I think is important, or reinvesting in renewable technology, which I think is important to the economy. But what is good is that I interviewed former EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy last year, or earlier this year, and she said the real detriment of Scott Pruitt is that his whole design was to dismantle the EPA by lowering the morale and taking people that have been there their whole career and forcing them out early.
Much like the State Department.
Yeah, by moving them into different departments they didn't specialize in.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, regardless of how you feel about the EPA, there's something about that feels a little inhuman, like just kind of forcing people out because you don't believe what the organization stands for. So I think Andrew Wheeler probably won't enact those same policies. And so that's at least a light at the end of the tunnel. But the biggest probably science disaster of this administration so far, Scott Pruitt, is gone.
Yeah.
Hurrah.
And you would hope that there would be greater scrutiny on Wheeler now that it's been such a controversial cabinet position.
I mean,
so far.
Wheeler's known as being sort of like a Washington insider, not to use too much politics speak.
Yeah.
And he's renowned for being kind of a low-key guy.
Yeah.
So the chance of him developing, 19 separate investigations into his actions are probably pretty low. I'm guessing he's not going to be keen on taking private jets everywhere and spending $200,000 on
so the controversy, we're probably not paying as much attention as to the evil shit that's actually going on.
Yeah, and I think the controversies were less interesting than the policy stuff. It's just the controversies were just straight up corrupt in a lot of ways.
One story. Okay, we're talking about something more, a little more lighthearted. I got a question for you guys. I'm going to pull, again, listeners out there, play along. When's the last time you had a dream about your smartphone? Have you ever had a dream about your smartphone?
I have never had a dream about my smartphone. I don't know that I've ever had a tech dream, if we're going to get real technical about it.
Wow.
I've definitely had dreams where computers were part of the dream. But never, I don't recall one with a smartphone.
This question comes out of a story from The Cut, and it's titled, it's a science story about why don't we dream about our smartphones? And it was prompted by a tweet where someone asked, I never have dreams about smartphones. And an informal poll shows that, people agree. They don't typically dream about their smartphones or couldn't remember a time when they actually dreamed about it. And why is that the case? And so one theory is from an author of a book about dreams, about why we dream, the transformative power of the nightly journey, and comes with a theory called the threat simulation hypothesis. And that theory is that the reason we dream is that dreams aren't just to have our brains moving throughout the night. It's to run simulations of threats. And think about the dreams that you have had. Fighting. Have you had dreams about fighting before?
Sure.
And being in some type of physical fight?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had dreams about succumbing to a disease or your teeth falling out?
I don't.
That's a common dream. I'd say that's a common dream. Have you had anxiety? Have you had anxiety in your dreams?
Sure.
Have you had dreams about your anxious things? Well, the theory is that you have dreams about the things that make you anxious as a way of running through scenarios of how you would cope with those things. And apparently, technology, for some people, smartphones are not a thing that you get anxious about. For me, it's completely wrong. I have nightmares about smartphones all the time, but it's mostly about getting the new phones.
Do you dream about Teslas?
Teslas?
Yeah, because you're having a lot of anxiety about your Tesla.
No, I did before I got it, before delivery.
So you were having dreams about it.
Oh, yeah.
So this is
absolutely
holding true for your end
After
of one.
reading this, thinking about the dreams since I read this, every dream is 100% about, has been a running through, like, knowing a video shoot's going to happen next day and running through a scenario of that video shoot in the dream before the date happens. It's actually, I don't know if that's like, it's confirmation bias because I've read the story now, but for me, it's actually true. So think about the last time you've had a dream about your smartphone and then ask yourself, what about your phone makes you anxious, aside from not having it all the time?
All right. Well, 2 more quick stories this week. There's obviously a 4th person in this room. There's the Baby Chan. And I'm wondering if you would ever enroll the Baby Chan in a big medical research study.
Like a longitudinal study or
like a longitudinal study.
Like a long term.
Like imagine, what was that movie that won an Oscar, Boyhood?
Oh, yes.
Imagine Boyhood, except a big medical study.
Well, if they're not going to get documented in film.
But every few years, you kind of check in on stuff. They take blood samples and stuff. So typically in the U.S., this has been something that has been met with some resistance. Just because it's hard to enroll, the cost to administer is high. But the benefits of these big studies where you can enroll like tens of thousands of people is incredible, because then you can make some pretty big recommendations based off of analysis. And one place where this is not an issue, not a cultural issue involving a lot of people, is in China. They have a study now that has recruited 33,000 parents and their babies.
Wow.
To not only study how they're growing up, but every year they test their microbiome as well. So they're able to see how bacteria are interacting with their health systems. And they've actually been able to come up with some initial results. So in southern China, incense is pretty common, and they were able to track incense actually leading to a higher degree of hypertension in mothers, and that is totally attributable to that incense. And they're also able to, let me make sure I get this right, they're also able to look at progesterone, which is a drug that's often, it's a hormone that's often prescribed for people going having risk of preterm birth. They're able to find that 40% of the people that were prescribed progesterone didn't need it.
Oh.
And so these are big findings that can change like basic medical behavior. But unless you have a huge sample, you can't make these sort of leaps. So I think this is a really fascinating look into how these big studies that are happening abroad could really change the way that medical advice or directives are sort of doled out. They hope to have 50,000 people enrolled by the end of 2020. So I'm excited about this. Part of the reason I got a 23andMe was just to contribute to a larger data set like this. So consider it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you're
We
hesitant.
will consider it. I'm still hesitant. Yes.
And finally, I want to talk about microdosing because Michael Pollan has been in the news for his latest book, which is on microdosing and some of the effects that taking some hallucinogens can have on you. And there's actually some science to back this up. And I'll have a provocative question in a second. But basically, one of the studies that's come out recently is about psilocybin and how that affects like different areas of your brain. And that there have been studies that show that it can reduce a certain type of anxiety and depression. It's not without its risks, but because there's no, a lot of these drugs don't have metabolic risks to you. Like it's hard to OD on marijuana, like nearly impossible. Psilocybin, like when taken in the right doses, very hard to OD on. You can have bad trips, but it's very hard to hurt yourself as opposed to some of the prescribed medication that exists right now. It's become an area of like really interesting scientific investigation now, mostly on the edge of depression. And a scientist recently threw out this sort of future scenario. What if we had clinics where you could go microdose?
Like in a safe space.
On the corner, yeah. So here in San Francisco, we're talking about safe needle sites for injection. So if you're like addicted to heroin and other drugs, here's a site that at least we can control for communicable diseases by using clean syringes.
Safely facilitating something.
But what if we took that next step, like safely facilitating taking?
I saw Adam like tweet something about this not too long ago, where he's like, a brilliant idea for an app would be an app that you could start if you were about to go on a trip, and it will let you know periodically how long you've been on the trip, and that yes, you are in fact still tripping.
I think that's probably a bad. Like you have to do like addition or something.
Where your nearest safe zone would be.
I actually really like this idea of having clinics where you can safely microdose. I feel it seems like the diagnosing of anxiety and depression are severe or considerably on the rise, especially here in this country, and we don't have public ways of treating that. Right now, most of it is either, I mean, generally speaking, go exercise and eat right, or take these pills that you do in the privacy of your home. An actual public setting where you deal with this and have something administered that's at least slightly safer on your system than other medical drugs. Obviously, we're not here yet. There's a lot more research that needs to be done. I actually really dig this idea. Because of how it erodes mental health stigma.
Oh, that completely agree. Not for us, Danica.
Did you just say no to me? Dare? Did you just say dare?
Dare.
Danica, let's go microdose just to show him.
Yeah, Baby Chan would love that. No, the first thing that comes to mind is all the awful things that are prescribed to people now, with all the horrible things, the side effects, and as far as like categories of drugs. it's not unreasonable to think that there could be more beneficial uses to things that already exist, and they're stigmatized in certain sorts of ways, but that doesn't mean that they don't have uses. And I think getting the mental health stigma down is a positive thing, because ignoring the fact that it's happening and it's escalating isn't helping us as a society.
That's totally, I mean, like, this is straight out of The Wire, what I'm suggesting. I'm talking about creating Hamsterdam a little bit. But the thing is, you're right. It is happening. So if we bring it more into the light, we can at least study it a little bit more rigorously.
Yeah.
All right. I think that does it for a moment of science. We're done with the audio transitions because the sound quality is so bad.
VR Minute will be back next week.
We're going to do a VR Minute, pinball, and we're going to do what we've been testing next week, although I have a bunch of tech that I have been testing, a new drone from Parrot, comparing with the Mavic Air, and a new tabletop 3D scanner from Matter and Form, but we'll talk about those next week. Let's get to talking about in and of itself. Now, hold on before we change to the LED lights in the back.
I'm just getting ready.
Should we talk about the show spoiler free first,
or should we just ruin it?
Or do we want to go right into the ruining?
Let's just spend like a minute talking about what the show is. I mean, people have probably heard what the show is before, and then we'll go into spoiler territory.
All right. So it's a one-man show. Think of it more of a one-man show with magic in a small off-Broadway theater. It's actually far down Broadway, a 150-person theater, 75 minutes. The magician is Derek Delgadio, and he was recently awarded Magician of the Year by their association. And the show itself is executive produced by Neil Patrick Harris, who is a big fan of Derek Delgadio's.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And also directed by Frank Oz, who was brought in to kind of tie the whole show together and give it a storytelling experience. Now, without going into the beats of the show, I think we can all say maybe how we felt leaving the show a little bit. Can we say that?
Sure. I mean, people know how I feel about it. I was floored by the experience. I was totally caught off guard. I was expecting a magic show, and I got one of the most human one-man shows in a long time that wasn't that was so reflective of the audience in a way that that was like deeply meaningful to me. It was one of the best nights of theater I've seen in a number of years.
I'll also say, before, Danica, I would definitely want to hear your opinion, that it's not an expensive show. There are actually rush tickets every day in cash 2 hours before the shows go up $30 a ticket, and there are no bad seats because it's only a 150-person theater. You can sit in the back row and you will get an amazing experience, as well as someone who paid more to sit in the first or second row. Okay, Danica, how did you feel leaving the show?
I mean, I had a particular experience in the theater because I participated in the show. So I've definitely had a heightened sense of being touched because I almost cried like during the show. But no, it's difficult. So the way that Norm and I both work is we like to reverse engineer things. We want to figure them out. We can't stop ourselves from trying to figure it out. And there are parts of that where I'm already like, my brain's trying to figure it out, and you're going along for the ride, you're enjoying it, but you're also trying to science it. And I left with this feeling of wonder, this appreciation for the performance I'd seen, but also I didn't want to reverse engineer everything because I enjoyed the wonder so much of it. Like, I enjoyed the human experience that I felt was just shared with me, but that I also shared within myself.
I cried uncontrollably at one point in the show. Like, it was, I had to take off my glasses and wipe my eyes, and I was crippled with emotion.
I mean, I'll say I cried more during the show than I did during Mr. Rogers. And I cried a lot during Mr. Rogers. All right. I mean, so people get an idea of this. This is not a typical magic show, and we loved it. Should we go into spoiler territory?
All right. So here goes 30 seconds of us fumbling with the LED lights in the back. Oh, don't just turn it off. You got to turn. You got
What color? What do you go with?
Red.
The proper transition.
Red. Gotta turn. Kishore's pressing the buttons. You know, you're doing still better job than Jeremy on this. Don't worry, he's not gonna listen to this podcast. All right, green. You were almost at it. That's the same. There you go. There you go.
Every color and none of it's turning.
I don't think any of it. I don't think we got red.
Nice. Okay.
All right, green. All right. So if you're watching the video, we are now, and if you're listening to the podcast, audio-wise, there's nothing after this. We're just gonna end with this segment, which is talking about, in and of itself, in gratuitous detail. So beginning now.
We should talk about, the first thing that happens when you come to the theater is you enter and there's a giant wall of cards.
Yeah, there are, I believe, 680 cards on the wall.
Why did you count?
I didn't count. I read that in an article. I counted.
I scanned.
I took a photo and did the math. And this is the only place you're allowed to take photos. And these cards are hung up in alphabetical order. And the cards say of a top half and a bottom half. The top half says I am. And Kishore's holding up one of the cards right now. And the bottom part has a descriptor for 680 different adjectives or nouns. I am, a mother, a brother, photographer. I am a ninja. I am a liar. I am, every
a true believer.
Exactly.
A wife. The whole spectrum of things.
And people are having a real wide array of conversations going into this. You can see people are joking around.
This is the interactive part, right?
Yeah. So some people are taking it really seriously.
Yeah. And you're encouraged to take photos of the wall, and the ask is take a card that you like, that you think represents you, and so I want to know what cards you took.
For sure. I will tell you, the only piece of advice I gave Norm about this whole show, I didn't spoil anything, is I said take it seriously, and I meant about this moment.
Okay.
And so I didn't take it as seriously as I would have, but I chose I am a troublemaker.
Oh, nice. Did you have to wait? Were you debating between cards, or just found one that caught your eye?
Did you scan the wall, or did you just kind of go where there was an opening and then look around and survey? What was relevant.
I kind of did something closer to that. I definitely took some time looking at the cards, but I remember seeing that, and I've referred to myself as a troublemaker before, and it just kind of rang in my head, and I was like, oh, I'll just grab this one.
Yeah, I was indecisive for sure. There were a bunch of cards that were funny, and I'm I could want that card. Are these cards is one of them gonna have a red dot in the back or something, or tagged or something? And I grabbed I'm a storyteller, so I grabbed that one. And then Danica, you grabbed.
Well, when I was looking at the wall, I just knew I didn't want something. I didn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to embody everything about you. Just a thing, and I like the idea of going quirky rather than wife.
Then literal.
Yeah. So I went with philatelist.
So
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Very nice. Philatelist is
a stamp collector.
True story.
Yeah.
So
Norm can attest that this is inaccurate.
Mm-hmm. So you grab your card and you walk in. The card has a perforation in the middle. You tear off the card. You keep the part of the card that says I am, and you give the other half that has your identifier to one of the ushers. You grab your seat, and then no photos at any point onward.
You're at a magic show.
It's not an elevated stage, so small theater. Stage is ground level. There's a table off the side with 2 chairs, and Danica's 2 chairs. Oh, there's gonna be audience interaction on this one. And then behind a wood paneled wall with these cubbies in them, and the cubbies have items in them. So it's kind of neat set decoration. Mm-hmm. One cubby has, immediately I was drawn to a cubby in the top left corner, which looked like it had a animatronic automata of sorts.
One had an idol in it, right?
The ship in a bottle.
Ship in a bottle. That's what I was.
Oh no, it was a bottle.
A bottle of whiskey.
A bottle of wild turkey.
A bottle of wild turkey on a pedestal. There was a wolf mannequin head, a wolf head, like plaster wolf head in one of them. There was a broken glass window in one of them with a gold brick inside.
And then scales.
And then scales in another one. And
like
then
scales of justice kind
Yeah.
of.
Yep. And then the final one was another segmented cubby with what looked like letters in them.
Like a letter sorter, an old-timey.
Yes.
And
letter
and
sorter.
this is essentially the conceit of the show. The show, if you've heard Adam describe it, there's 6 tricks.
Yeah, it is
And
a
there are
show,
six
six tricks and 6 cubbies. So
Yeah.
every trick is associated with a cubby. Now, Derek Delgadio comes out and he begins with a monologue, and the show is more like a one-man show than a magic show in that the thread that runs through it is a story that he tells. And at the end of each story, as he's telling the story, he's either doing the trick or it happens at the end of the story. So the first story he tells is about a story that was told to him in a bar about a Russian roulette game, and a legendary Russian roulette game of a man who sought to and these are all very well written. I would not say they're performed, because Frank Oz did not want Derek Delgadio to perform these stories. These are truthful tellings.
Well, it's performing, it's not acting.
He's not acting, right? The way he delivers them is honest.
Yeah.
There is one sort of line in the show that I think he says at the beginning, right? That he's not going to tell you a lie tonight.
Yeah.
And
it is worth pointing out that it is actually autobiographical. Like,
Yes,
it
yeah.
feels very personal from the very first moment.
So to that point, we can't properly convey the stories that as he told them.
Nor should we try.
And we
Right.
shouldn't try. So what we're telling is kind of how we remember it and the high points of the plots of those stories. So I want to get that out of the way. So this is no substitute for seeing the show by any means. You
No.
should still see the show, and we also don't want to ruin it, even though we are spoiling it. He tells a story of this Russian roulette game, and at the end, it's a fantastical story. The protagonist dies, survives a sequence of Russian roulettes, becomes a legend, and then takes things too far, becomes overconfident, and dies. And he is identified as the
Roulettista.
The roulettista. That's right. And the story was relayed to Derek Delgadio at a bar because the person said, "You are the roulettista," and he didn't know what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And after he tells that story, he does the first trick effectively, which is that he takes the bottle of wild turkey off the pedestal, and he brings the chair out, and then he peels the label off the bottle and folds it into a boat. And he does this trick that's very reminiscent of the Penn and Teller, the snipping of the rosebuds. It's like you're looking at shadows. A light comes out from underground and casts a shadow behind the chair and the bottle of whiskey and this paper boat he's folded. And as he's carefully doing it, and then it's very beautiful music starts playing. The theater goes quiet, and then it becomes what essentially is a sleight of hand trick where he moves the paper from the top of the bottle to inside the bottle, and the paper boat is floating in the whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Beautifully executed. His take on what is a version of a trick that other magicians have potentially done.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. And he does one final thing. He takes the bottle and sets it back on the pedestal, but then he crushes the pedestal, and it's just wet sand, and he puts it there.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should go through every trick, but I mean, like that artistry that you're talking about,
Yeah.
that comes through in virtually every trick. There's one trick that I don't want to think about too much because it was so beautiful.
Are you talking about the cards or the wolf?
I actually think the ending is the one that caught me off guard.
Well, I think we
trick.
have to talk about the ending.
But I think we should fast forward to where people got involved.
Well, we'll say that of the tricks that are done, there's a card trick, an amazing card trick where if you're a fan of card mechanics and manipulating cards, he talks through how he learned to be a card mechanic, and he basically shows you.
He's telling you the
everything
trick that he's
doing.
going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he blows your mind still doing it.
Still
Yeah.
gets you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The most personal trick has to do with the gold brick in the glass. And this is one that has, he tells an amazing personal story about his relationship with his mother. And then in that, he changes your perception of the brick, and the brick becomes a metaphor for the aspect of the story. And then he essentially, I mean, we're spoiling here, he disappears the brick. He disappears the brick in a way that we were talking about after. We couldn't understand how he disappeared.
I still don't know
the brick.
either.
And he disappeared it, and then, the part that you can't understand is that the brick appears somewhere in New York, and he encourages you to find the brick. And people have, if you search on Instagram and Twitter, found the bricks from their shows in New York.
But also,
lying
its
somewhere.
Location is based on audience participation.
Right, an audience member picks to an intersection, and I'm sure there's a room full of painted bricks in the back, and then a stagehand is sent off in a car immediately to put it there. So afterward, you put the brick there. But that's not the part. That's not the magic. The magic is in the story. The magic is in him disappearing the brick. There's also one aspect of the show that's not a trick. It's just part of the storytelling. And I do want to talk about this one, because this one is audience participation.
Are we talking about the book?
We're talking about the book.
The book is magical.
So it is. And this is where the magic of a theatrical experience, of being somewhere and being part of an experience, and as the transcends what we think of as physics-defying magic. What he does is he asks anyone if anyone would like to participate in the show. And some people raise their hands. I raised my hand immediately. I wanted to participate. He didn't choose me, unfortunately. And he says the only thing that the cost of this participation is that you won't get to see the end of the show. And that what happens is that since he began doing this show a year and a half ago, he's been keeping a book, a big leather-bound, really thick encyclopedic book. But it's not a book, it's a journal. And what happens is that every night at every show, he gives that book into the custody of one of the audience members who is asked to leave before the end of the show, and asks that audience member to write in the journal their experience of the show, and also then what they imagine the end of the show to be, because they don't get to see it.
Right.
And the scariest part, and I believe this to be true, the scariest part for him in the entire show is that after he selects Mr. Tomorrow, the audience member who will take
they
the book,
have to come back the next.
Where is the book? The book. He gave that book out the day before, so it needed to come back. And so he asked, "Did Miss or Mrs. Yesterday come back?" And they did. And every show that's been done, someone has seen it twice or 1.5 times, because they've attended it once, not knowing that they would be kicked out, have this book, write this passage in, and then come back the next day and bring it back. And the book has always been brought back. So this woman for our show brought the book back, was brought on the stage. They muse over, did you look through the pages? Oh, I like this story. This one's really cool.
There's a lot of, like, when he flips through, there's a lot of beautiful pages.
Drawings. There's trends where people start typing up their notes and then pasting them. And for a week, people started doing that.
Did he show the one with a QR code?
There's a QR code which links to a video of a husband and wife debating what to put in the book. And so, and then they read what this last person, their entry, and what they imagined. And for our showing, it was a beautiful entry for this woman that wrote how she imagined. And obviously people put a lot of effort because they are now a part of the story. That's the book. But not only them, everyone, you feel, the magic is that you feel a connection, even as an audience member who didn't have the book with them. And to have that book, oh my gosh, right? To be able to flip through, you definitely have a deep connection. But all of us, we felt like we were part of Derek Delgadio's 2-year journey of putting on this show. And that every night is not just a repetition. Every night is different, is the next step, the next day in that journey. And that felt truly
Which
magical.
is a perfect addition to the fact that it's already such a personal show. You're pulled into him so quickly, and what he has to say and how he says it. And
He's crying, he's laughing. It's like a beautifully acted show.
What a thing for him at the end of this journey, when the show ends on August 19th, to have this artifact of 2 years of his life that he poured every night so much emotion into, and it's magic in a way. Like I'm choking up thinking about it, because
it was
it's like,
totally touching to hear. I remember at this point my first suspicion was like, oh, this is a plant, And then when the person goes up and tells the story, you're like, oh, this is not a
No.
plant.
And they feel, I mean, for us, the person that came up was like beaming.
Yeah.
Because they had the 24 hours of being directly connected. It's like you're giving, as much as he gives in the show to the audience every night, a piece of him, he now is a piece of the audience from 2 years. And all the and we are connected that way.
And the spectrum of those responses.
Yeah.
I mean, I was part of me was very happy that Norm did not get the book because, you know, I know that it would take a lot of effort to really contribute to it, but we also really wanted to get our hands on that book and look through it because it was just mesmerizing, the things that he was, just those little highlights that he was flipping through. That
book was for one person, right? So you would have had to have left her in the theater.
And one person would come back.
Yeah.
Right?
So I have to ask about a different portion of the show. So that was amazing.
And that wasn't one of the 6 parts.
That was just an in-between thing. The highlight for me in my show was the letter.
Yeah. So he tells a story, and all of the parts begin with a story. And again, this is what I think Frank Oz brought to it was the connective tissue, the sinewing of, you know, the parts of the body that he had made as the show.
Personal vignettes as they're attached to the wall.
And not being afraid. And, you know, as much as you want to trust your audience, you still sometimes have to give them more rope to pull along with that. So he begins by telling a story of a fable, you know, of blind men who are investigating an object, and the object, they touch an object and it looks like certain things from different parts. You know, it looks like a giant tree, it looks like a snake, feels like a snake, feels like a giant tree, feels like a big piece of cloth. And you quickly realize this is, you know, a parable about blind men discovering an elephant. And then you notice, and I didn't notice this until after reading about it afterward and looking at photos of this, the arrangement of these letters that are in this cubby are arranged to look like the silhouette of an elephant. Which is,
I don't think I noticed that.
Yeah, if you look at a photo, if you Google it, it's arranged to look like an elephant.
But remember, this happened first, before he got into that part of it.
Yeah, he asked the audience.
He asked one person in the audience in the front row to, and the cards that we talked about in the beginning that the usher took are all in a stack neatly on the table. Where the table he does some of the card performance, one card act. And he takes this stack of cards and he offers them to an audience. Goes, pick one. Mm-hmm. And the audience member picks one. And for our show, the audience picked one. And Derek looks at it and said, who here is a philatelist? And that's Danica. Danica's the philatelist. And he said, it's a stamp collector, for those of you who don't know.
Stand up if you want to see what a philatelist
He knew what
like.
it was.
Oh, of course he knew what it
was,
right?
Right?
Yeah, yes. But yes, he stand up if you want to know what a philatelist looks like. And
because that's probably a funny moment where people are giggling.
Danica, what did you think of that moment?
Well, I'm not one. I actually don't enjoy audience participation. I don't know if it's because like I'm attention deficit and I have anxiety about things because of how I process experiences or whatever. But I was exhilarated at the idea, but also this is not like I'm not I don't want the ball.
Yeah.
The ball makes me nervous.
But you want the book.
But hell yeah, with the book. So I was, hot flash of exhilaration and like, where could this possibly go?
You don't want to mess it up either. I mean, part of the tension of these shows is you don't want to mess up what they're doing.
Yes.
And you want to kind of lean into the act. But also, some audience participation can be cringy.
Yeah.
Which is a part of the reason why I don't enjoy it. I don't like watching it most of the time, and I don't think of myself as like, I need to participate.
At this point, I felt so cared for that I was sort of bought in. The person that got selected in my audience also like reluctant. Like you could see like that sort of like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm a little reluctant, a little scared.
And I do not thrive as a person. I do not thrive on attention.
So you were asked to come up to the stage and sit in a chair. And this is when he tells that story of the blind man and the elephant.
No. So we do the card.
Okay.
I'm identified.
Yes.
And then he has me sit down.
Yep.
And then he goes through everything. So then I'm like...
He makes you stand up as a pregnant woman for a while?
Well, yeah. She sits down at the center of the stage. She sits down at a chair.
Well, first, no, I sit back down.
Oh, sorry, sit back down.
While he does this thing with the elephant.
Yes, that's right.
And in that time, I'm like, fuck, shock.
What's going to happen?
So my feet at this point are swollen insanely, and I've already slipped off my shoes. So I'm like, oh God, okay, this is happening. This is going to be, what could this possibly be? And I have to slip my shoes back on because like I know I have to get up again. So
and at this point, I'm like thinking, this must be, because we had just watched the Darren Brown special on Netflix. This must be a mentalism thing. Like he's going to pick up, you know, like, oh, you're pregnant or something, right? Some aspect of her life, right? Some part of audience participation. So the story is told, and the moral of the story is, what if, you know, these blind men, yes, ostensibly they are touching an elephant, but what if what they were touching was something exactly what they thought they were touching, something more magical, a creature that was tree trunks and a snake and a giant sheet of canvas and leathery canvas. That's not what we think of as an elephant. They perceive the world differently. And he was asking us as the audience to try to imagine the magical and perceive the world differently. What if this isn't just a stack of envelopes? This is something different. And so we went up on a step ladder and then pulled up a stack of envelopes. And at this point, I think he asked you to go to the stage. And so, Danica, why don't you describe it?
So I go up, shake his hand, and he's, you know, has this whole stack of letters from the wall, and he just has me pick one. And so I'm looking through, and like, I like stamps. I'm looking at the stamps. And I definitely felt what had happened like a week and a half ago is I went to the post office specifically to buy Mr. Rogers stamps, and they were out. And it was bummer. I got Sally Ride stamps instead. But so in this stack, there was a Mr. Rogers stamp, and I almost went for that. But of course, there's also a Wonder Woman stamp, which at this moment, I know
that's flatulous choice is what that's called.
I knew that something was about to happen, and I knew that the thing that I would naturally pick would be Wonder Woman because Wonder Woman, and I decided that there's nothing that can be gained from me resisting my first choice on this. So I'm just going to roll with the thing that I'm going to be most interested in. So I picked this envelope that had a Wonder Woman stamp on it. And he had me open it up, although I'm trying to remember what. Oh, he had me tell him what was on the back of it. So I have the letter.
Oh, let's see. You have the letter.
Yeah. So
I'm also going to point out for people listening to the podcast, our memory card is full on the video. So the video ended maybe 5 minutes ago.
Whoops.
So this is an audio only experience.
Now. You'll edit in.
I'm now holding the envelope that I picked from the stack.
It's a manila envelope with a wonderful old school golden age Wonder Woman stamp on it.
Very well done. And it's directed to Derek Delgadio. The sender's address is blacked out, redacted. And at the back of the envelope, it says very small print. It just says sibling. And he asked me if I had any siblings, and I've got 4. So I open the letter, and he has me read it just to myself first, and then he has me read it aloud to the room.
What's your reaction when you start reading it?
I know my jaw dropped. I don't know. I definitely was like looking for Norm because I'm like, oh my God, because this letter is completely spot on.
So we're not going to ask you to read the letter on the podcast, but you can describe what the effect is.
Okay. So there are points of this. So it's from my sister Joanna, and it is her handwriting. And she makes several references to things that only she would know. And it's just a really lovely, beautiful letter that made me tear up on stage. And my jaw just hit the floor. And I remember at some point just looking at him like, what the fuck did you do? How did this work? And I was deeply touched. So I stood and I read it, and I just... This overwhelming feeling of warmth and loving collusion that must have also been included in this act.
It's just magic.
Right.
This is almost exactly what happened in my show. I mean, it was, instead of a sibling, it was an old friend. And she opens the letter, and she must have read 2 lines and immediately like kind of grabbed at her mouth and started crying. She started tearing up, and it was joyful though. And the tension in the audience when something like that happens, is so incredibly wonderful and meaningful. Like, I get that you had an extra level here because it's Danica and everything else, but as somebody that wasn't connected to the person on stage, it was so touching to see this moment because it was clearly real.
Legit.
It was so absolutely real.
And I think that the magic there, is, and he says explicitly, you're watching a transformation. You're watching a person, you, Danica, the Flatalus, come to a realization, and you, the audience, 149 people, are watching you transform in real time. And that is the magic. And that's, I think, the second most powerful moment in the show.
So my actual favorite moment of the show was actually after the show, because I sought out the woman who read the letter on stage.
Wow.
And we talked for a while about her friend and her relationship.
Oh, that's
because I felt like I got this peek into somebody's world, like a stranger's world, in this really personal way. It made me curious and made me really just reach out. And that was the best moment of the night for me.
And when the show was over, there was at least a dozen people who asked me,
were you plants?
And we're trying to ferret out if I was a plant or not.
Yeah. Those people suck.
Those people don't believe in magic.
No, I mean,
but there was also wonder. They're like, was that real?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was telling Norm and Adam this. Like, there was a set of people that are trying to figure the show out.
Yeah.
And then there's a set of people that just at some point just say yes to it.
Yeah.
And did anyone ask you more about the letter and your relationship and that kind of stuff?
Oh, no.
Oh.
I mean, I'm just in the, was it real and blah, blah, blah. And I think I offered, she uses nicknames from childhood in here. She references, that we're expecting a child, all these things. And it was also just a really beautiful letter that would come from my sister. So it was like having her there thinking about me, participating in something that can feel very distended from you. You're watching a performance, but this is not like any other performance you're ever going to see because it is so personal. Automatically, you're connecting with him, his story. And then he brings in, in a show about identity, he's bringing you in, and in my case, bringing in part of my family, my, beloved part of my family, saying sweet, wonderful things to me. And I'm reading it in front of, still a group of strangers, but are also having this shared experience that is so touching.
All right.
You bawled during this moment?
No, I didn't.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was feeling nervous, and
I was wondering
for her, and definitely touched. But that wasn't where I was crying. Okay. So let's get to that part, because we're not going to go through every bit, but the final, I think we do have to talk about it, even though it reveals, we have to talk about the final.
It's actually the penultimate thing.
It's true. And let's not even talk about the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
But the penultimate thing is the thing worth talking about.
It's the cards come back.
The cards come back.
The I am cards come back to
so the last trick he does, and the last story he tells, is at the very end of the show, and is after the Mr. Tomorrow takes the book, gets kicked out of the show, doesn't know what's going on, and he takes that stack, which is the stack that your name was pulled out of, your card was pulled out of, Danica, and he puts it on the scale. And he puts it on the scale, and then he has a card of his own, and he puts on the other side of the scale. And I believe they balance out or something, right? And then he asks the audience a question, and he says, you all pick cards before you enter the stage. And if you are someone who you feel in your heart of hearts that what you picked is who you are, please stand up.
Recognize that people were having fun with it and they picked ninja.
Exactly. But he didn't tell people not to stand up.
Yeah.
Because if he said it
was an invitation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
again, another personal moment.
And I feel like it's scattered, maybe 40% of the people stood up. I actually didn't stand up. And then Danica was like, oh, you should stand up. I was like, oh, okay, I'll stand up. And I hesitated and then stood up. Danica, you did not stand up.
I had been outed.
Did you stand up?
I did.
And then he goes to the front row, and he goes to the first person, and he goes, you are, and he tells them who they are. And he goes to the next person, And he goes, you are a searcher. You are a friend. You are a treasure seeker. You are a doubter. And he goes person by person. And I think at this moment we're like, the first row, he knows their card. He knows their card. Somehow he knows their card. This is an amazing act. And it should be it. But he doesn't stop.
Just
and he
keeps
goes
going.
slower and he looks you in the eye. And sometimes he doesn't even say you are. Sometimes he'll just go, hi, Mom.
Yeah.
Or you'll find it. And this is the moment. I lost it.
Yeah. I could not have been looking pretty at this moment either. What got me was the trick. I can imagine a million ways this trick is done. That's not the important thing.
That's not the important part.
Yeah.
The important part was what it was like to witness other people being witnessed and like really being seen and having that identity be shared with this group of people in this cauldron. And the reason I told you to take it seriously was for this moment, like for this incredibly special moment where you got to have all of that reflected out without all of like the other nonsense, all the words we surround that with. And you could just see it, like when he would talk to people and interact with them in this way, it just hit people in a certain way, like touch them in this really sensitive spot. But he was like very caring and nurturing in the way he interacted with them. There was one particular one where he didn't say anything. He just held his finger to the sky and she started crying. And there's something about like the tone of that cry that like I'll remember.
Yeah.
I can probably start crying now thinking
Yep,
about it.
yep.
Like I will remember it. And I thought that was so precious what was offered in that moment. It wasn't that we were watching a one-man show. We were watching 150 people like reveal themselves to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew. And then one more thing, and that was it. The one more thing we won't talk about. And so that was show. That was 75 minutes of kind of intense performance, and can't recommend it enough. I don't think that even if you listened all the way to the end of this podcast, I don't think that you would not have a similar experience. It's still worth going to. We were debating going a second time in our 4 days in New York, and we ended up not doing it because we had a singular experience. Yep, that we didn't feel like could be replicated. But in my mind, I kind of wanted to do it again.
I actually kind of don't want to see the show again because I feel like there's something incredibly special and meaningful about it. I want to see the book. I want to read the book.
And that is exactly what I said to Norm, was that exact same thing. Like, I want that to be its own contained, super crazy, special experience.
It's like
I'm happy for the book to sit under a jar, like a bell jar in his...
Oh, but can't you see it in, like, living in a museum? And like a book that you go,
50 years later, but
or if they are, if they're gonna do a documentary, and if they're going to, this thing could be replicated and sold easily.
Yeah, we don't know what releases they signed.
It just highlights this is why we love art, is for stuff like this, where it moves us, it transports us, it creates like connections where there wasn't one. This was the best theater experience I've been to in years, by far.
And with that will wrap it up for this week's episode. Whew.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Danica.
I'm so happy to be here to talk about this.
Oh, and thank you all for listening. We will be back next week with Jeremy with actual music playback and a video that goes all the way through if you're watching
Probably
the video.
some tech news too, something like that.
Yeah. No outro this week. We're going to leave it at that. Thank you all for watching / listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.